So I want you to picture a math problem for a second, but a really, really brutal one.
Oh, the kind where the numbers just absolutely do not work out in your favor.
Right, exactly. So you have 4 male lions, and they're completely surrounded by 80 spotted hyenas.
Which is just a terrifying image.
It really is. They're trapped against this steep bank of a river. Darkness has fallen, and they are stuck there for 9 straight hours.
And, you know, if you understand anything about the ecology of the African savannah, you know those numbers don't just look bad on paper. I mean, statistically speaking, it is a biological impossibility for the lions to survive that.
Yeah, the math says the lions die, and they die quickly.
Without a doubt.
But in July 2022, researchers watching this exact scenario unfold in the Masai Mara realized they were witnessing something that would basically force us to rewrite the textbooks on animal intelligence.
It's honestly like something out of a cinematic thriller.
Totally. So today we're doing a deep dive into the research and transcripts from this massive wildlife observation event. We really want to explore how tactical coordination, complex political maneuvering, and, well, sheer brotherhood somehow outmatched pure overwhelming numbers.
Right, because we are looking at a profound case study in cognitive assessment here and cross-species psychological warfare.
Which is insane to even say out loud.
It really is, and that's what makes this so much more than just a remarkable survival story. I mean, what happened that night challenged decades of rigid assumptions about what animals are actually capable of planning, strategizing, and feeling.
Absolutely. But okay, before we get to the battle itself, we really need to understand the 2 brilliant, highly unusual minds that orchestrated it.
Because this was not some random encounter over a scrap of scavenged meat.
No, not at all. This was a calculated, premeditated war.
Yeah, it really was.
So I want to look at our antagonist first. Researchers designated her as H47, but she eventually became known as the Butcher.
Which is quite the title.
Right, and she's a spotted hyena matriarch. She is 15 years old, which is
ancient. I mean, that is ancient for a wild hyena, considering most don't even make it past 12.
Exactly. And she looks the part, too. She's missing a notch in her ear. She has this twisted front leg, burn marks. Like, she is covered in the scars of a very violent life.
Yeah, she's seen some things.
She has. And her motivation for this event seems to be pure revenge, honestly. Over her lifetime, she lost 14 pups to lions.
Wow. That's a huge toll.
It is. And specifically, in 2020, she lost 2 pups directly to our protagonists, coalition known as the Northern Brothers.
And, you know, the way she channeled that loss is what really caught the attention of the scientific community.
How so?
Well, Dr. Sarah Mengi was leading a long-term hyena study in the region, right? And she documented something absolutely unprecedented regarding the Butcher, because spotted hyena clans are usually incredibly territorial.
Right, like they fight each other all the time.
Exactly. They use scent marking and aggressive boundary patrols just to keep rival clans out. But the Butcher managed to build a super clan of over 80 hyenas.
Which is just a massive number.
It's huge. And she did it by forming alliances across 3 distinct rival groups. So it was her own Tala clan, the Marsh clan, and the Ridge clan.
See, I'm trying to wrap my head around how an animal actually does that. Like, how do you convince natural enemies to just stop fighting and join forces?
It's fascinating, right? It requires suppressing immediate territorial instincts in favor of a long-term goal.
Right.
The Butcher achieved this by deliberately permitting overlapping boundaries. She would actually allow rival clans to feed on carcasses in her territory without initiating hostility.
Wait, really? She just let them eat her food?
Yeah. Over months, she essentially used food tolerance to build these social bridges, eventually coordinating shared hunts.
That is wild.
Yeah, it really is. Dr. Mengi noted in her subsequent research that this kind of political maneuvering, like building a massive coalition for a specific future military target, is normally only seen in chimpanzee communities and obviously in humans.
Right.
So for a hyena to demonstrate that level of advanced social cognition is just staggering.
And the crazy part is, she wasn't building this massive coalition to secure more food. She was building an army to hunt the Northern Brothers.
Yeah, it was a targeted campaign.
So let's introduce them, because they are just as fascinating. This is a coalition of 4 male lions.
Right.
You have Kasai, who's the calculating leader, and his biological brother Tao, who is this massive 480-pound enforcer.
Just a total unit.
Oh, absolutely. Then you have their adopted coalition brothers, Jabari and Simba, who are these hardened survivors that joined them from a completely different territory.
And their bond was incredibly unique, wasn't it?
It really was. The observation notes mentioned they communicated in subtle, low-frequency rumbles.
Which is a highly specialized form of communication.
Right, because usually lions are roaring.
Right. Yeah, but high-frequency sounds bounce off trees and brush, which basically alerts everything in the area.
Okay, that makes sense.
Low-frequency rumbles, though, they travel through the ground and dense thickets. So this allowed the lions to coordinate their movements covertly over long distances without tipping off prey or enemies.
And that coordination allowed them to do something most lions avoid entirely, which is hunting 1,500-pound Cape buffalo by choice.
Oh, wow. Yeah, a Cape buffalo can easily gore a full-grown lion to death.
Exactly. But Kasai, Tao, Jabari, and Simba had developed this really refined, role-specific technique.
Like a tactical unit.
Very much so. Kasai would purposely draw the buffalo's attention and horns, Tao would use his massive weight to hit the slank and unbalance the animal, and Jabari and Simba would target the hindquarters to bring it down.
That requires absolute trust.
Complete trust. Everyone had a highly specific job, and if one failed, the others could literally die.
Right.
And that deep ingrained trust is exactly what the butcher was up against.
So, set the scene for us. When does this all go down?
Let's move to July 12, 2022. The Northern brothers had just taken down an injured wildebeest and dragged it near a bend in the Mara River to eat in the shade.
Just a normal afternoon for them?
Exactly. But the butcher had been tracking them, learning their routines, and she had her 80 hyenas hidden in the thickets in 3 separate waves.
Like a literal ambush.
Complete ambush.
Yeah.
At 3:47 p.m., she springs the trap, hitting them with overwhelming noise and mass. But I have to stop here because I'm trying to picture this logically.
Okay.
If you're listening to this, put yourself in that situation. If I'm a 500-pound apex predator with massive claws and a bunch of smaller animals rush me, my first instinct isn't to back up into a corner.
Right.
Like, why not just charge the hyenas, break their lines, and scatter them?
It's a great question because charging is exactly what their evolutionary programming dictates they should do.
Right.
Lions are ambush predators. When they're suddenly overwhelmed by numbers, their instinct is the flight response. You know, break formation, scatter, and save yourself.
Right, flight over fight in a mob situation.
Exactly. And the butcher knew that. She wanted them to run and separate so her 80 hyenas could isolate them and pick them off one by one.
But the lions didn't scatter. And what they actually did is completely anti-instinctual.
It really is. Instead of panicking, Keizai gives one of those specific low-frequency rumbles.
Like a command.
Yes. And the 4 lions begin to retreat, but they retreat backward. Step by coordinated step, they back up to the riverbank.
Which is brilliant.
It is. They purposefully utilize the terrain to eliminate the hyenas' numerical advantage. By putting the deep water behind them and a steep, muddy bank to their left, they limited the attack vectors.
So they couldn't be surrounded anymore.
Exactly. The hyenas could now only come at them from a narrow 45-degree front. And the lions formed a tight shoulder-to-shoulder formation with absolutely no gaps.
It's literally a phalanx. It reminds me of reading about ancient military tactics, but playing out in nature.
Yeah, it's Spartan strategy right there on the savannah.
And they needed that tight formation because the physics of this clash are terrifying. I mean, we tend to think of lions as the ultimate biters, but a spotted hyena's bite force is 1,100 pounds per square inch.
Which is significantly stronger than the lions.
Yeah. Their jaws are literally evolved to crush bone and extract marrow.
And the physical toll of taking a bite like that is immense. In the first major clash, the butcher probes the center of the line by sending 10 aggressive young males forward.
Testing the waters.
Right. Kasai shatters the skull of the lead hyena with a single full-force swipe of his paw.
Wow.
But 3 more slip through the defense, locking those bone-crushing jaws onto his shoulder and flank.
And this is a critical moment. If Kasai goes down under that weight, the formation breaks, the hyenas pour in, and they all die.
Yep, the whole line collapses.
But here's where that brotherhood overrides instinct. Tao doesn't charge forward to attack the hyenas biting his brother.
Right.
Instead, he moves sideways. He presses his massive 480-pound shoulder directly against Kasai, acting as a physical brace.
He anchors him.
Exactly. Yeah. He anchors his brother so Kasai doesn't collapse under the pain.
Think about the cognitive processing required in that millisecond. I mean, you are seeing real-time, adaptive, cooperative defense.
It's unbelievable.
Tao recognized that stability was mathematically more important than offense in that exact moment. And because of that brace, Kasai maintains his footing, bites a hyena, and Jabari manages to rip another one right off Kasai's shoulder.
So the frontal assault completely fails. The lions hold the line.
They do.
But the butcher isn't just a brute force attacker. Like we said, she's a strategist. When the swarm fails, she pivots to a war of attrition.
And this is where the psychological warfare truly begins.
Right.
She stops the mass rushes. Instead, she starts sending small groups like 3 or 4 hyenas at a time in rotating assaults.
Oh, that is so insidious.
Very. They attack the right flank, wait 90 seconds, attack the left, wait 2 minutes. It is just constant, perpetual pressure.
Which exploits a major physiological difference between the 2 species. Because spotted hyenas are endurance athletes. They have massive hearts relative to their body size and can run for miles without tiring. Lions, however, are built entirely for short, explosive bursts of power.
Their muscles are packed with fast-twitch fibers.
Exactly. They simply are not built for a multi-hour endurance match.
And the butcher knows this. She is forcing them into a terrifying mental and physical endurance test as darkness falls.
And then things get even worse.
Yeah, at 6:47 p.m., she orchestrates a highly coordinated hamstring attack.
Just thinking about it makes me wince.
It's brutal. 12 hyenas simultaneously dive low, aiming specifically for the lion's Achilles tendons and hind legs.
Right, because the biomechanics of this are crucial. If you sever a lion's Achilles, it loses the spring mechanism in its leg.
Exactly. If it can't stand, it can't fight.
But the lions adapt again.
They do.
They immediately drop their stances, pulling their rear legs underneath their bodies to protect their hindquarters. It completely nullifies the hamstring attack.
But think about the sheer physical exhaustion of that.
I know. Try holding a tense, crouched squat for hours while simultaneously fighting for your life.
Yeah, you'd be shaking after 5 minutes.
The physical toll mounts so quickly. Kasai is bleeding heavily from his shoulder, Tao's face is swollen and his eyes closing from bites, and Jabari is starting to visibly limp.
Which brings us to, honestly, the most baffling part of the entire standoff for the scientific community.
Yeah, this part is wild.
Because as this exhaustion peaks, the lions are forced into situations where pure evolutionary survival logic dictates they should abandon each other.
Right.
Under the strict rules of natural selection, self-preservation should override everything else. Yet, they do the exact opposite.
Reading the researchers' notes on this part actually gave me chills. Let's look at 2 critical moments of sacrifice that just shouldn't happen according to the textbooks.
Okay, let's hear them.
First, Jabari realizes his right flank is about to be completely overwhelmed by 20 hyenas massing for a charge.
Not good.
Not good at all. So instead of holding the line and letting the formation get crushed, he executes a suicidal 35-mile-per-hour countercharge directly into the swarm.
Wow.
Yeah, he hits them like a battering ram, completely disrupting their coordination, but he gets surrounded. He is isolated and taking severe bites to his leg.
And then Simba reacts.
Yes. Simba, his adopted brother, abandons his post in the defensive line and dives into the swarm to save him.
See, tactically, abandoning your post in a defensive phalanx is an error.
A huge error.
But Simba recognized a deeper social necessity. Losing Jabari meant losing the war.
Right. And they managed to fight their way back to the riverbank, but it cost them dearly. Jabari's leg was permanently crippled in that maneuver.
And it gets even more intense a bit later, doesn't it?
It does. At 7:23 p.m., Tao just collapses.
Oh no.
He isn't even knocked down. His body simply gives out from blood loss and sheer exhaustion.
I mean, he's a 480-pound animal running on empty.
Exactly. And the hyenas immediately surge forward to finish him. But Kasai, who is already bleeding profusely himself, steps over Tao's unconscious body.
He doesn't just stand beside him.
No, he stands directly over him for 6 agonizing minutes, acting as a living shield.
That is just incredible.
The footage analysis actually shows Kasai taking 11 separate bites during that window just to keep the hyenas off his brother.
And, this specific moment raises massive questions for evolutionary biologists.
Why is that?
Well, why take that level of risk? Under the biological theory of kin selection, which is often summarized by Hamilton's rule, an animal might risk itself to save a relative if it helps pass on shared genes.
Right, the selfish gene idea.
Exactly. But the math of Hamilton's rule completely breaks down here.
How so?
The degree of risk Kasai accepted essentially guaranteed his own death, which doesn't neatly fit mathematical models of genetic propagation.
Because if they both die, no genes get passed on.
Precisely. It points to something science is often hesitant to attribute to wild animals, which is profound emotional bonds and true selfless empathy.
Yeah, it defies basic self-preservation entirely. I mean, standing over a collapsed 480-pound body while 80 bone-crushing jaws are snapping at you from all sides.
It's heroic, honestly.
It is. But thankfully, Tao eventually wakes up, uses Kasai to pull himself back up, and the formation holds.
Which brings us deep into the night, around 10:37 p.m.
Right. The hyenas are tired, the lions are practically dying on their feet, and Kasai lets out this deep, resonant, low-frequency roar.
Now, that roar is a textbook example of a biological concept called costly signaling.
Costly signaling. Okay, what does that mean?
So a classic example is a peacock's tail, right? It's heavy, it attracts predators, but it signals to mates, hey, I am so fit and healthy that I can afford this massive handicap.
Oh, I get it.
Yeah, so by roaring when he was bleeding and exhausted, Kasai wasn't just calling for help, he was advertising strength from a losing position.
Like a bluff, almost.
A very calculated one. He was signaling directly to the butcher and her clan, yes, you might kill us, but look how much energy we still have. How many more of your clan are you willing to sacrifice to finish the job?
Wow.
It's a calculated move to psychologically break the enemy's resolve.
It means willpower and loyalty actually became a quantifiable defensive tactic.
Absolutely.
And the hyenas were doing their own grim math at this point. I mean, they had already lost nearly 20 clan members, dead or dying by this point.
That's a huge percentage of their force.
It is. And the super clan was starting to bicker, and younger hyenas from the rival factions were just wandering off.
Yeah, the massive political alliance the butcher had built was fragmenting under the stress of sustained losses.
It's easy to be allies when you're winning.
Exactly. You can easily build an army on the promise of an easy victory and a free meal, but when it turns into a 9-hour meat grinder, those fragile political ties dissolve very quickly.
Right.
The rival clans simply weren't willing to die for the butcher's personal revenge.
Which brings us to the dawn. Defeat for the butcher and a permanent legacy for the Northern Brothers.
Tell us about the dawn.
By 4:15 a.m., a new sound cuts through the savannah, the roar of the lionesses in the distance.
Oh, wow. Reinforcements.
Yes. Kasai's pride had heard his low-frequency calls hours earlier, and they were finally arriving.
The butcher is suddenly faced with a tactical nightmare.
A little nightmare.
If she continues attacking the exhausted males now, the fresh, angry lionesses will arrive mid-battle, basically trapping her clan between two forces.
She realizes her dream of overwhelming force has completely failed. So at 5:47 a.m., as the sky is just starting to turn gray, she signals the retreat.
Wow.
23 hyenas are left dead on the battlefield, and the 4 lions are still standing.
That is just incredible. And, the aftermath of this event and how it was analyzed is just as fascinating as the battle itself.
Oh, for sure. Dr. Manji published a detailed paper in Nature about this coordinated defensive behavior.
But it wasn't just biologists paying attention.
No. The U.S. military actually analyzed the observation footage. Like, I saw an Apex Truth documentary touching on this, where a retired Army colonel wrote an entire breakdown praising the lion.
Praising them for what, exactly?
For their overlapping fields of defense, their utilization of terrain to protect their rear, and their dynamic reallocation of resources.
Dynamic reallocation.
Yeah, basically meaning how they shifted their formation to cover for the injured.
That's amazing. And the scientific community really had to face a reckoning with this data.
Yeah, they did.
Because it proved definitively that this wasn't just elaborate hardwired instinct. You don't instinctively form a defensive phalanx and utilize terrain bottlenecks.
You have to think about it.
It required cognitive assessment, role specialization, and real-time adaptive planning.
Right.
It forced a broad admission that the social and tactical intelligence of non-primate species has been historically vastly underestimated.
And honestly, the way the lions live their lives after this night is a testament to that deep intelligence.
How did things change for them?
Well, they all survived, though they carried the scars of that 9-hour siege forever. Tao's left eye never recovered from the swelling and bites.
Oh, man.
So the coalition adapted. Tao became a defensive specialist. He used his good right eye to track threats, and his massive size to pin prey rather than chase it.
That's so smart.
And Jabari's leg never fully healed. He couldn't sprint anymore, so he became an ambush hunter, basically waiting in the brush while the others drove prey toward him.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they completely restructured their coalition's entire hunting strategy to accommodate their permanent disabilities.
Which is perhaps the most incredible sign of complex social structure we can observe.
Exactly.
They didn't cast out the weak members to improve the group's overall efficiency, which is what rigid survival of the fittest would predict.
Right, they didn't leave them behind.
They accommodated them. And because of that care, Tao actually lived until December 2024, reaching 12 years old.
Which is an exceptional lifespan for a wild male lion.
It really is. And when he finally died, observation teams noted that Kasai stayed by his brother's body for 3 full days, visibly mourning him.
That is heartbreaking, but also so beautiful.
Yeah.
And what about the butcher? Well, she lived until January 2025, reaching the unheard of age of 18.
Wow.
She never challenged the Northern Brothers again, but researchers did observe her in her final years, occasionally just standing at a distance, silently watching Kasai.
That is cinematic right there.
It is. We will never know if it was lingering hatred or, I don't know, perhaps a mutual respect between two brilliant commanders.
Yeah.
But their lives were permanently tethered by that one night.
It really highlights how this single event shattered our assumptions. The mathematics of survival clearly dictated that 4 lions could not survive 80 hyenas.
Right.
But those biological equations couldn't quantify brotherhood. They couldn't account for grit, emotional bonds, or just a unified refusal to surrender.
I think for you listening, there is a massive takeaway here about how we view the natural world and maybe even ourselves.
Yeah, definitely.
Because when logic, odds, and every available metric suggest an impossible outcome, sometimes sheer resilience and unity can rewrite the rules entirely. The math said it was over, but the lions simply refused to do the math.
Survival isn't strictly about who has the sharpest teeth, the highest numbers, or the most advantageous evolutionary traits.
No, it's not.
It's about resilience. It's about having the cognitive flexibility to stand shoulder to shoulder and hold the line when every single instinct tells you to run away.
So I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about your day.
Okay.
If a coalition of lions and a matriarch hyena can execute complex military strategies, forge cross-faction political alliances, nullify numerical advantages through terrain, and demonstrate profound grief and loyalty.
What else is out there?
Exactly. What other rich, complex inner lives are playing out in the wild right now, entirely hidden from human eyes? We started with a brutal math problem, 4 versus 80. But it turns out the only equation that actually mattered was 4 lions acting as one.